What's up, you guys? Void here, coming back at you with another top 10. This time we're going to be looking at the top 10 best commander cards in Orzhov colors. As always, we're going to start it off here with the honorable mentions, and we have quite a few because Orzhov colors in this format are just stacked. There's just a ton of cards to choose from, a lot of removal, a lot of awesome legendaries. First up, we have one of the commander options from Commander 2015 in Daxos the Returned. Little 3-mana dude, 2/2. Whenever you cast an enchantment, you get an experience counter. You can pay 3 mana and put a white and black spirit enchantment creature token onto the battlefield. It has power and toughness equal to the number of experience counters you have. Very underrated commander option. He definitely isn't one of the better ones, but once he gets going, he's incredibly fun to play. Just making these enchantment creature tokens that have just massive power and toughness because you just fill your deck with all these enchantments. Very underrated commander. And then we have the two partner commander options from Commander 2016. Ravos Soul Tender, Taissa the Weaver. Taissa's more or less just good card draw if you're playing a multiplayer game and you have multiple different opponents you can attack. Ravos, however, I feel like he's the better one of the two. Again, the problem with both of these and just partners in general is that we don't have enough depth when it comes to the partner keyword, being able to put two different commanders in the command zone. It's very unique, and definitely if we were to get more of these, let's say next year or even the year after that, it would open up the possibilities for these two commander options, so they're definitely worth being honorable mentions. And then we have the three Saurons in black-white, Lord of Innistrad, Solemn Visitor, and Grim Nemesis. I think the reason why these are all just honorable mentions is the fact that they don't really do enough. Some abilities might be good, but they might lack when it comes to their minus, or their plus might not be solid enough. Their alts might be average. They don't really stand out when it comes to black-white. They're good options in Super Friends, but they don't really stand out when it comes to just Orzhov, period. And this goes for Kaya, Ghost Assassin as well. She's also a black-white planeswalker, but she's even less impressive. Then we have Divinity of Pride, 5 mana, hybrid black-white, so very specific towards Orzhov-based decks, especially the life gain strategies where you naturally have more than 25 life, so pretty much you shouldn't have a problem with having an 8/8 flyer out there with lifelink. Pretty good, but really that's about it. Doesn't really do anything else. Dagger's Knell, kind of slow. Late game, it's either good or it's terrible. You really want to do something like this immediately, and you want, for 7 mana, you want to get some creatures out of the graveyard right off the bat. You don't want to have to wait for your upkeep to get them. Has the huge upside of getting any creature from any graveyard, but that's about it. And then we have Vona Butcher of Magan, one of the newer legendary creatures from Ixalan, and pretty good. Actually, what you want. You want good removal. You want a way to gain some life consistently. She provides you with that. The only downside here is that her activated ability is something you can only do on your turn, which is a big downside. You want this at instant speed. Unfortunately, you can't get it. We'll probably see a ton of play in this format regardless, but still, definitely worth being an honorable mention. Now we move on to the actual list here. Number 10 is Athreos, God of Passage. So basically, whenever a creature of yours dies, you get to return it to your hand unless an opponent pays 3 life. Now this is very cool because you can just look at whatever opponent you want to and say, hey, do you want to pay 3 life or else I get this back to my hand? And a lot of players might say, okay, yeah, you can return it back to your hand if it's not that significant of a creature. So you can effectively lock down some opponents this way, because some of them are going to be forced to have to give you back those creatures because that's 3 life. It may not seem like a lot, and it usually isn't a lot until late game when it actually matters. And losing 3 life, well, you're basically getting lightning bolted. Sooner or later, you don't have that option anymore. So he makes a very good graveyard-based commander option. But even as one of the 99 and just a good Orzhov-based deck, pretty solid having that ability to recur creatures, bring them back to your hand. That's pretty solid. Number 9 is Taissa, Orzhov Scion. Probably one of the most underrated commander options in this entire format. Really doesn't see as much play as she should. Honestly, my favorite commander option in these colors, if I had to say so. Her abilities are just fantastic. You get to sacrifice 3 white creatures to exile a target creature, which is just fantastic removal. It deals with commanders, deals with indestructibles. Perfect. However, her other ability, which is pretty cool, whenever a black creature dies, you get a 1/1 white spirit flying creature token, which is awesome because that combos with Darkest Hour. Little 1 mana enchantment here that basically turns all creatures black. Fantastic card because all you really need is a sack outlet and you have infinite death triggers with Taissa on the field at the same time. So naturally you want to use something like an Altar of Dementia or a Blasting Station to effectively end your opponent's game. Just a fantastic commander. She combos well. She's good for pretty much whatever you want to do. She's perfect with Blood Artist effects, stuff like that, as well as just token strategies. She's just fantastic and versatile all around. Absolutely love her. She should see way more play than what she does. Number 8 is Comebal, Console of Allocation. This guy is also extremely underrated, not really as a commander option. I don't like him as a commander option, but as one of the 99. If you want to talk about just pressuring your opponents into not comboing off with their non-creature spells, decks like Kess Dissident Mage that are all about non-creature spells, you definitely want to be able to punish your opponents. They're going to be losing 2 life, you're going to be gaining 2 life. Just keep all of your opponents in check, because 2 life, basically it's a 4-point life swing between you and whoever decides to cast a non-creature spell. In certain decks, especially control decks, something like this is just incredible. You're already playing counter spells in a lot of decks that would consider playing this guy, such as Aloro, so adding that little bit of life cushion there as well as draining your opponent at the same time is just fantastic. Number 7 is Debt to the Deathless, one of the most amazing mana sinks in this whole format. Basically, you pay that 4 mana, 2 white, 2 black, but you pay an X cost, and your opponents lose twice X life, and you gain that much life. So effectively, it's better than Exsanguinate, which is the mono black version of this card, basically the same thing. So that twice X life is just fantastic, because you don't have to put that much mana into it, unlike with Exsanguinate where it's not twice X. So there's so many decks in this format that don't have solid win cons that would rely on this to win games, and it really is a fantastic card. Gaining life, a life cushion's always good at the very worst, that's what it does for you, but a lot of times this is going to be your win con. Just a brilliant card. Number 6 is Lee Eternal Pilgrim, yet another commander option. She is pretty cool as well. She has the ability to sacrifice creatures. You gain life equal to that creature's toughness. There's so many awesome options here. Tree of Perdition is one of my favorite ones. Just get a massive tree there, sacrifice it, gain all that life, and then suddenly you can just pay 3 mana there to sacrifice another creature, and then exile any target non-land permanent, which is fantastic removal, which is what these colors are all about. It's all about getting the best removal. She's just a fantastic commander option. She's one of the most popular commanders in these colors too. As one of the 99, she's also pretty solid in other life gain strategies as well, so she is versatile. Definitely a card that you can put in a lot of these black-white decks in the format. Number 5 is Carlava of the Ghost Council. This guy is just fantastic, very similar to Ailey. However, I feel that the cost to use his abilities are a lot easier to do. You don't have to have any creature sacrifice in order to get him going there, so there's a huge upside. All you really need, though, is to get life gain triggers to make him work. And the reason why I like him, though, is because it's not just about the whole life gain strategy. You could use him as an obvious Voltron commander. Basically, whenever you gain life, you get 2+1/+1 counters on him. So all you really need are a ton of these life gain triggers, just fantastic ways. There are the Soul Sisters, the obvious ones, and you have just lands that enter the battlefield that gain you life. There are a lot of upkeep effects that gain you life. Just a whole bunch of ways in this format to gain life, so getting a ton of +1/+1 counters on him shouldn't be that hard. But where the awesomeness is that you can also double him as a good control commander too, because all you have to do is pay 2 mana, 1 white, 1 black, to remove 6 +1/+1 counters on him to then exile a target creature, which isn't as good as Ailey. Yeah, Ailey can get rid of target non-land permanents, which is obviously much better, but with Karlov, I feel that you just get a lot more versatility out of the deal here. So just a fantastic option as a commander, one of the most popular, if not the most popular commander option in these colors. It just gets massive over the course of a game. He's only 2 mana, which is really the ridiculous thing about him. He's incredibly cheap, he's easy to get out there multiple different times, and if left alone, he's just going to control the board state, exile a ton of creatures, or even just get massive and stay massive and equip some swords to him, equipment that can make him unblockable, and just start dealing commander damage, because it is pretty easy. Fantastic commander. Then number 4 is Utter End. For 4 mana, at instant speed, you get to exile a target non-land permanent. This card sees a ton of play all around the format, not just black-white decks, but all decks using black-white, it seems. Just a fantastic 4 mana instant speed removal spell. Can deal with just about any single permanent. It can deal with gods that are usually indestructible enchantments that aren't always creatures. It can deal with indestructible artifacts like Darksteel Forges, things that are just so problematic, as well as Planeswalkers, which there aren't a ton of spells that specifically deal with Planeswalkers, so when you can just deal with all non-land permanents, or just any non-land permanent, this card is fantastic. Pretty good. Number 3 is Vindicate. For 3 mana, at sorcery speed, you get to destroy any target permanent. So this includes lands, what Utter End does not deal with. So if something like a Tabernacle, everyone's just struggling to deal with it, you have something that can deal with it in Vindicate. If someone has a Gaia's Cradle, you have something that can deal with it. So basically problematic lands, your Maze of Ith, stuff like that. The only downside though is that it isn't instant speed, which is a huge downside. If this was instant speed, it would probably be number 1 on this list, but it's not, so it isn't. Still though, very good removal, optimal removal. I wouldn't say it's an auto-include in every single deck playing black and white, but it is an auto-include in most decks that just play black and white, so very good card. Number 2 is Merciless Eviction. If you're seeing a common pattern here, as we head towards the top of this list, we're going to see a ton of removal, and that's really what it is. Removal is fantastic in these colors. I mean, you're talking about the 2 best colors for removal in the format. Merciless Eviction just deals with just about anything you really want to, with the exception of lands, of course. It can exile all planeswalkers, which is unique in these colors. You have the ability to deal with planeswalkers. You don't really have that in a lot of other colors. You're capable of exiling all creatures, all enchantments, as well as all artifacts. If there is a downside to this card, is that you are paying 6 mana to only really deal with one of these permanent types. So keep that in mind. It's not going to outrank something like an austere command, but it's definitely going to put in work in your black-white decks, and it's usually an auto-include. Just a brilliant card. Usually board wipes are preferred removal. Targeted removal's usually pretty good as well, but when you can just deal with all permanents that are problematic, if there is the only reason why this wouldn't be at number 1 would be the fact that it doesn't deal with everything. It only just deals with one permanent type, so yet again, it is worth the number 2 spot on this list, but there is a downside there. Then number 1, it is Anguished Unmaking. This card is fantastic. It's an auto-include in literally every deck playing black and white, unless that deck somehow doesn't need removal. That's the only reason why you wouldn't see this in those decks, which there aren't too many decks in this format that don't need removal. What it does is basically Utter End for 3 mana. The only other downside is that you have to lose 3 life, which losing life in Commander, if I had to choose between paying 1 more mana to cast this spell or 3 life, I'm usually always going to go with 3 life because it's more efficient. Now, this isn't always going to mean that I'm just not going to play Utter End, but it is going to mean that when it comes to auto-includes, because of that difference, it's so significant. Late game, early game, whenever you need removal, having less mana to pay, that's always important. This is why cards like Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile are fantastic removal spells in this format as well, because they're cheap. They're really cheap. You can cast them early on in the game if you have to. Cheap removal is always efficient, and versatile removal is always dominant as well, and this always deals with multiple different permanent types as well. So you can deal with planeswalkers just like Utter End. You can deal with non-creature permanents, you can deal with creature permanents. Again, only downside is that it doesn't deal with lands. That's about it. Otherwise, just a fantastic card. It's usually going to deal with the biggest problem on the field. So anyway, guys, that was my top 10 list for the best Orzhov colored cards in the Commander format. Let me know what your favorite Orzhov cards are. Let me know if there's any card that didn't make the list that you were curious about. Anyway, you all have a wonderful day. Void here, signing off.